The South African Human Rights Commission has launched an inquiry into systemic challenges around access to water in KwaZulu-Natal. NGOs, residents and government officials, including the Premier, will be giving evidence over the course of the week. Speaking to us on the first day of the inquiry is Paveshri Pariachi, who is the Commission's acting provincial manager. Thank you very much for your time this evening. I must say, Paveshri, it's a very sad time in South Africa when we would need to have a commission of inquiry into the provision of basic necessities such as water. Maybe talk us through what caused the establishment of the commission before we get into some of the details that came out today.
So the provincial inquiry on access to water emanates from the number of complaints that the Commission has received in relation to challenges with access to water in the province. We have found that we've had a substantial increase in the number of these complaints, which appears to be a systemic human rights violation. And that has led to the Commission's decision to convene a provincial inquiry on access to water in the province.
When there were community members or those stakeholders that laid their various complaints to the Commission, was there an indication of them having their cries never heard or there not being enough resources to take out to the different communities to provide water to them? What were some of the major things that came out in those complaints?
I think in most of the instances, we find that complainants do not get any responses to their complaints, which is why they turn to the Commission for assistance. On a number of occasions, the Commission has engaged with the various municipalities, and what we've established is the challenges relate to budgetary constraints, poor infrastructure, and lack of maintenance, which results in the inadequacy of service delivery.
So what came out of today's part of the hearings that is important for our viewers to note, those who weren't able to listen in or watch the proceedings? Paveshri, if you could hear me, I'm just asking about what came out of today's proceedings in terms of some of the salient points that were heard from the testimony of the hydrologist in terms of the major issues in KZN when it comes to water provision. That's if you could still hear me.
Yes, I can. So today's testimony did include an overview of the challenges with access to water in the province by Professor Peter Ochala, as you've indicated, a hydrologist, researcher, and consultant on water resources. The testimony also included other evidence from the Tongaat Civil Association and the Ugu Ratepayers Association. We've also heard from the Women's Leadership and Training Program and the Abushlali-based Mjondolo movement of South Africa that represents shack dwellers. We've also heard an account from residents residing in the Intuzuma and Hambanati areas. And in essence, the testimony has illustrated the hardships and suffering that communities without access to water are experiencing. Complainants have indicated that they are respective municipalities, and they have indicated that state organs are failing to deliver in terms of their respective communities. We have also heard that in some areas, the provision of water via the municipal tankering service is insufficient to cater for the needs of communities. We've heard that in certain areas there's been as little as one tanker that's been allocated to service a community of 7,000 people, which is completely inadequate. In this instance, we find that some community members are able to purchase water, while many of the community members are simply not able to afford this.
And of course, the situation of the water issues in KZN, Praveshni, is exacerbated by those floods that we saw just a few short months ago. That's made the infrastructure issues a lot worse and access to water extremely difficult to many of the communities that you've just mentioned, and perhaps even more across that province.
Yes, that's quite correct. Look, the impact of the floods has been quite drastic on many of the communities. A lot of people have been displaced, and the challenges have really been exacerbated in this instance. But I think what is very important for us to note is that challenges with access to water have existed far long before the issue of the floods having occurred. And these are systemic issues which need to be addressed.
And as you listen to the different testimonies over the week, how do you determine where the accountability goes? Because different municipalities will say that there are budgetary constraints, as you mentioned. There are issues of the lack of maintenance, but also the infrastructure, which in many of these communities is quite old and isn't able to provide for the community members. So when we start talking about issues of accountability, where do we start to look? Is it at a national level, provincial level, or local municipality level? I mean, it's a difficult one, wouldn't you say?
Yes, I would agree. It is a difficult competency. I think the various levels of government have their respective responsibilities in regard to the provision of water. The respective water services authorities are responsible for for the provision of water, but certainly at a national and provincial level, there are also responsibilities in this regard.
And then just a final thought from you. What are we expecting to see, or who are we expecting to hear from tomorrow as the proceedings continue?
So tomorrow we are hearing further from the Msunduzi Ratepayers Association. We also have the former premier, who is now the MEC of Kokta, that will be appearing before the commission. And we also have additional complainants that will be appearing to give evidence before the inquiry.